Joy to the world, the Lord is come.
Hello, thank you for listening to A Glimpse of the Kingdom. I'm David Pendergrass. I get asked almost every single year if it is okay to celebrate Christmas. Or, David, what do you think about this? I remember last year I was teaching a Bible study class, and a person in the class, and a man who's from Africa, and who got very, very upset with the idea that the church celebrates Christmas at all. And I asked him why in class. It was an interesting class. He was very worked up, but it was interesting to me because I had never heard this before so strongly. I'd heard it here and there, but for someone kind of in the flesh, so to speak. He said, if you go online, look on YouTube, you'll see all kinds of videos that demonstrate that it's not a good idea. And I said, well, YouTube might be a good source for that. I'm curious, but what do the people say on YouTube? And he listed a couple places, and particular places in Jeremiah and some other places where it says not to carve out images for yourself of wood. And I told him, I said, well, I hear what you're saying. It's the chief problem with that is Christmas as a celebration did not exist in the ancient world. It's a modern invention. So an ancient prophet cannot be talking about an event or celebration that did not exist. That would be nonsense. Jeremiah is not talking about a holiday used in North America when there is no United States civilization or European civilization at the time Jeremiah speaks. Secondly, the text to which he spoke, and I'm not going to spend the time looking it up right now, the text to which he spoke, which we did look up, talk about going out to the countryside and bringing in trees to carve images out of them for idols, for idol worship. Just the other day, I received an email from a friend, and she forwarded to me this long document. It must have been 8 to 10 pages. Well, long compared to what the topic. It was a whole essay by this church of why celebrating Christmas is kind of the devil. It's not necessarily of the devil, but it is a false religion, and in that sense it's of the devil. It's sinful to do it. And it had all these different points. It had like 10 different points to it to try to make the argument. And I told her, my friend, I very much applaud that they're trying to apply the Bible well. Oh my goodness, that's wonderful. The problem is everything they're saying is wrong. Again, it's the same kind of stuff. There are texts in the Old Testament which speaks about not having images in your house. Well, the problem with that is I don't know of anybody, and you might do this, and if you do, you need to stop it. I don't worship my Christmas tree. My Christmas tree, my candy canes, my garland on the wall does not evoke or invoke a particular God whatsoever, besides the Lord Jesus Christ, Father, Son, and Spirit, a Trinitarian. I'm a Christian, so these Western stylisms, you might say, of the way we celebrate Christmas here in North America, have nothing to do with anything religious whatsoever. That's why the Old Testament texts, which speak about idolatry, are completely irrelevant. They're completely irrelevant. So is it okay to celebrate Christmas? Of course it is. But I have two major things. One is I want to give you a quick history of where the Christmas first started. And this is a quick history. And then secondly, give you my reflections and my thoughts on Santa Claus and the celebration of Santa Claus. Okay, just very quick, briefly. So the first thing is about Advent and Christmas. Technically speaking, if you think about it, most people in the Western season, I'm American, so I'll talk for Americans, okay? In North America, our Christmas season starts what's called Black Friday, so it's the Friday after Thanksgiving, and it ends on December 25th. So the real Christmas season in a secular setting, in a secular meaning, you might say, begins the day after Thanksgiving and ends December 25th. And the Christian calendar, if you didn't know that, there is a thing called a Christian calendar, and it's celebrated by most Christians around the world. There are two different major ways of reading the church calendar, two major ways. There's not kind of sort of a third one, but the major one is Roman Catholic, and the other is Orthodox. You might add Anglican. Anglican can be different as well. But when I say the Western church, I mean, there's a long history of why it's called the Western, but anyway, European and North American. Eastern church we'll call Orthodox church, but that includes in the Western church Protestants and Roman Catholics and Anglicans, those three major divisions. And the Eastern Orthodox, and that includes Russian Orthodox, Ethiopian, and so forth, their calendar is different. In the Western church, we are not in Christmas season after Thanksgiving to December 25th. In fact, we're in a season called Advent. Advent. Now, Advent comes from the Latin word adventus, which means coming or arrival. It is the season which begins the Sunday nearest November 30th, because it changes, the Sunday nearest November 30th until December 24th. So the Sunday nearest November 30th until December 24th. Now, churches use different symbols for the season of Advent, but they usually involve symbolic candles, particular Bible verses, seasonal colors. This season, like Lent, just like Lent, is a time of preparation, full of prayer, fasting, repentance, and reflection. It's anticipatory for the arrival. And almost certainly it came after Lent had already existed. Lent came first. Lent is a 40-day season preparing for Resurrection Sunday or Easter. That's another podcast. So this is another season of preparation called Advent, Adventus. Now, Advent reflects on two aspects of Jesus' coming. First, the first time the Son of God came in a frail human form in Bethlehem. It also celebrates his second coming in glory and lordship over all creation. So during the season of Advent, we have a somewhat of a spiritual renewal and preparation. We reflect on our spiritual condition and how much we need Jesus to save us and so forth in two different kinds of coming or arrivals. One, when he came as a baby. Secondly, as he's going to come again in glory. So to say it another way, Advent celebrates his first coming. It anticipates his second coming. Now, the term Christmas is an Old English expression for the Mass of Christ, in Latin, Christus Mesa, the Mass of Christ. The Western Church and the Eastern churches, they disagree over the exact time of Christmas, but in the Western Church, Christmas time, or used to be called Christmastide, with a D, it begins December 25th and ends January 6th, the day of Epiphany. And this is why someone came up with the song, 12 Days of Christmas. So Advent is the Sunday nearest November 30th till December 24th. At the time of recording this podcast, I'm in the season of Advent. We're about 15 days away from Christmas or so. I'm in Advent season, so it's technically incorrect if you're a Christian to say Merry Christmas, Happy Christmas, because we're not in that season. We're in Happy Advent. And then Christmas season is 12 days long. And it'd be really cool. And sometimes my family, we've done things like this, but not exactly like it. If you gave a gift every day of the 12 days of Christmas, that'd be pretty cool. But mine's kind of like that because my birthday is December 28th, so always, not always, but usually got the shaft and I got birthday and Christmas on the same day. But some days it kind of feels like a long Christmas celebration because now my wife is so good about celebrating those days distinctly. So Advent means coming. When was Jesus born? Well, we don't know. We just don't know when Jesus was born. There's no historical records. And the first few centuries of the church, no one really cared at all about his birth, only his life, death, and resurrection. And the exact date of Jesus' birth is debated. And before 525, there was no official date adopted by the Western Church. Now, again, the Western Church is most Protestants and Roman Catholics around the world. The first reference to the birth of Jesus on December 25th, it might come from Theophilus of Antioch. He lived around 171 to 183. So around, let's say he wrote around the 180s. And some ancient authors agreed, some disagreed. So the first reference to the birth of Jesus being December 25th comes from the late 2nd century. Why in the world did they choose December 25th? Now, this is a long topic, and I'm not going to give you details. I'm going to give you just a cliff note. There are two books. If you want to read about this, there are two books you probably ought to go read. One book is by a person named Joseph Kelly called The Origins of Christmas. Another book is by Susan Roll called Toward the Origins of Christmas. Joseph Kelly and Susan Roll, R-O-L-L. But here's a overview. It was not uncommon to date Jesus' birth in association with vernal equinox or some other association with the sun. And remember, the vernal equinox is the day when it marks the change from the longest night to the gradual elongation of daylight hours. Now, in modern times, we date the vernal equinox, where the days start to get longer and longer. We date it to March 20th to 21st. In the ancient world, people dated the vernal equinox to March 25th. Now, that's important because if you date the birth of Jesus to something to do with the sun or the vernal equinox, it's going to make your day around March 25th matter. The conception, that means when Mary got pregnant, conception, or the birth of the Son of God bring, quote, light to a dark world. And they like to think that way. Remember, because Jesus is the light of the world, is what's called in John's Gospel, and so they like to link that to the vernal equinox. For example, a Latin author, he wrote in called De Pascha Computus, is written around 243, that the first day of creation was March 25th. The first day of creation of the universe was March 25th. The author assumes that Jesus must have been born on the same day as the creation of the sun, which is on the fourth day in Genesis 1, which would mean March 28th. You hear that? So he says, well, the first day of creation was March 25th. The sun was made 4 days later, and since Jesus must be born on the same day as the sun, Jesus must have been born on March 28th. Not December 25th, but March 28th. Other authors believe that since the first day of the universe's creation was March 25th, it must be the cause that Jesus, God's new creation, must have also been conceived on March 25th. Conceived, that is, come inside Mary's womb. And that would place Jesus' birth 9 months later, which would be December 25th. I'll say that one more time. So other authors thought since the universe was created on March 25th, that had to have been the same symbolic day that the Word, God's new creation, was born inside of Mary, and therefore she conceived 9 months later, which is December 25th. Other authors agreed with their Jewish counterparts that great prophets were conceived on the same day as their death. And since many Christians believe that Jesus died on March 25th, then he must have been born on March 25th. Other authors dated Jesus' birth to various days in the spring, such as April 2, April 19, or May 20th. So they give all kinds of reasons why these dates are all over the place. So the fact is, we just don't know. But let me say this about the dating, because this is always repeated in the media, the news, by skeptics, by atheists, whatever, and they're all wrong. It's often argued that Christmas is simply a pagan festival because the Roman celebration of a religious festival called Sol Invictus, which means the unconquered sun. It was held on December 25th in the Roman world. Now, it's argued that Christmas simply is a, quote-unquote baptized pagan festival. It is true that Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun festival, dedicated to the sun god on December 25th, fought for religious attention and the empire. Now, here's the chief problem. The Christian dating for December 25th had already been suggested by the time Sol Invictus was established by Emperor Aurelian in 274. The problem is dating. Christians were already suggesting that Jesus was born on December 25th before the Roman emperor made Sol Invictus a Roman holiday. So it is completely false to say that the reason why they came up with the date is because Romans were already doing it, and they say, hey, that's a good one. Later on, the official celebration might have been influenced by the fact that Romans were celebrating a festival, but the dating itself could not have been influenced by it because it already existed. And some people make a big deal about the shepherds in the field in Luke 2:8. Now, that could happen during the winter months. It could happen during the spring. The problem is we just don't know. Now, that's the dating of December 25th. But when did they start celebrating a Christmas festival? Well, the roots of having a festival celebrating the birth of Jesus begins in controversy. A sect, that is a small section, you might say a break-off group of Gnostic Christians, and there's a long story there, but there are Christians who joined together Christianity with a lot of Egyptian religious beliefs. Most of them seem to have lived in Egypt. So a sect of Gnostic Christians existed in the early 2nd century in Alexandria, Egypt, led by a guy named Basilides. This group believed that Jesus was not born divine. Instead, the divine Word united with a human Jesus at his baptism. And that's why we call this adoptionism. Anyway, they believe Jesus' baptism was the first time that the divine Word appeared on earth. I'll say that one more time. They believed that Jesus' baptism was the first time the divine Word appeared on earth. So he came out of those waters, and the Gnostic Christians said, finally people could see what the Word looked like. And they called this festival Epiphany. Epiphany because that's the Greek word for appearance. It's the first appearance of the Word. And they celebrated this festival on January 6th. Now stay with me. On January 6th. Now that's an old tradition from the early 2nd century. Orthodox churches, that is, most of all the other Christians, argue that the divine Word first appeared on earth at Jesus' birth, not his baptism. That is, when Jesus came out of Mary's womb, That's when you saw the Word, not at his baptism, it was at his birth. Because they thought that was heresy. You can't say that he appeared at his baptism. That means that God the Father just adopted this dude named Jesus, and he says, I'll pick that one and send my Word inside of him. No. He was born, the Word made flesh. So many churches celebrated Jesus' birth and baptism on January 6th. So a lot of, let me say that again, so a lot of Orthodox churches took the same date that the Gnostics were doing already. They already picked January 6th and said, no, we're going to celebrate his birth and his baptism for theological reasons. In fact, to this day, the Orthodox Church celebrates Jesus' birth and baptism on January 6th. Now, later on, the Western Church, Roman Catholics and Protestants, would separate these events. December 25th for his birth, January 6th for the visit of the Magi, or sometimes they celebrate January 6th as his baptism, depending on the church. So they've separated December 25th from January 6th. But originally, for a long time, they celebrated the birth and baptism on the same day. And if you do your math, December 25th, January 6th is Christmas time, 12 days of Christmas. Now, in the Western Church, December 25th, 1 AD, AD doesn't mean after death. AD stands for Anno Domini, in the year of our Lord. So in the Western Church, December 25th, year 1, was not standardized until 525, when Pope John I commissioned the monk Dionysius Exiguus to make a standard calendar for the Western Church. Now, unfortunately, his calculation of years was off by nearly 5 years. We know this from scholarship now. He was just, off by about 5 years, bless his heart. So Jesus was born between 6 to 4 BC. And that's just confusing, but he is. And so in scholarship or any commentary or anything you ever look at, the dating there is actual dating, but they're not going to date it from good old Dionysius's figure. Now we all use a modern consensus view that Jesus almost certainly was born between 6 to 4 BC. And part of the reasons we know that is because Herod, if it's true that Jesus was born under King Herod, Herod died in 4 BC. We know that from other records. So he could not have been born in the year 1. Okay, but there's no way to know exactly when he was born. There's just no way to know exactly when he was born. So the fact is, we don't know. So why not pick December 25th? Because it's just like any old day. Why not do February 3rd? I mean, who cares? The fact is, we celebrate his birth, and they picked a day, and it came from theological reasons. And theological reasons, are a great reason to pick a date. Great reason. We know for a fact that, according to the New Testament, Jesus did not just become, he didn't just become divine. He was always that way. Well, who is St. Nicholas? Well, the chief figure of secular celebration, Santa Claus, is based on a Christian saint. We call him St. Nicholas. Now, Nicholas was born in the 3rd century on the southern coast of what we call Turkey in Patara. He was eventually made a bishop of Myra. So this is a real historical dude who was the bishop of a city called Myra, where he constantly took care of the poor, the sick, and the children. What's interesting, he was exiled and in prison under Diocletian's rule. Diocletian was one of the Roman rulers who kicked him out and threw him in prison because he was a Christian. After being released, he attended the Council of Nicaea in 325. Now, Council of Nicaea was a gargantuan council. It gave us the first version of what would become the Nicene Creed. Not the final version, but a very important version of Nicaea. He died December 6th in 343, which is celebrated as St. Nicholas Day, December 6th. He is buried in Dimri, Turkey, which is ancient Myra. You can go to his tomb there today. Of course, over time, the history of Santa Claus took over and so forth. The St. Nicholas character that looks like we all know what he looks like now, a big, heavy, fat white guy with a white beard and so forth, comes from a picture in the 19th century of a character painted off of a description of Father Time from Charles Dickens's A Christmas Carol. If you ever see old drawings of it, you'll notice that the description fits Santa Claus character quite well. So they took the description of what he might look like from Father Time, Father Present, you might say, the present ghost that takes Scrooge around, and it became red. Now, this is what I've learned. I'm not sure how, I think this is true, but I remember hearing this from a little documentary, that the reason why red was used because the Coca-Cola company used Santa Claus to sell Coca-Cola products. And since red and white are their official colors, they made sure he had the red outfit. and hence it stuck forever. Once things got into print, it stuck forever. Like the turkey. The turkey was used all over the world for military during Thanksgiving. It was a pretty inexpensive meal they could have. And when they came back from World War II, the turkey was used often for people who came back from battle. And there were some pictures in Time magazine of a mom holding a big turkey, feeding her family. And that picture for a commercial stuck. And that's what kind of took over the turkey market for Thanksgiving in North America because of ad campaigns. Well, should we celebrate Santa Claus in a Christian home, or maybe at all? My view is absolutely not. I had Santa growing up a little bit and so forth, and I understand the charm and whatnot. But the reason why I do not think Santa should be celebrated is not because I think it sends your kids to hell. I don't think that it's a deep, profound sin. I don't think you turn into a pagan. I don't think those things. What I think is two things. One is that kids, and not to mention adults, but it's particularly kids, have a very difficult time already distinguishing between a narcissistic, entitled, give me treats and presents kind of gimmicky Christmas, a materialism Christmas. They already have a hard enough time as it is because most parents do a horrible job at making certain that Christmas is about the birth of Jesus, or chiefly about the birth of Jesus. I'm not at all against going and seeing lights on houses or light your own house. I mean, I've got garland in my own house. I've got a Christmas tree up. I love the Christmas movies, Christmas tunes, and that's wonderful. But we have to be very careful about making certain that in a Christian home, our children understand that Christmas here, though there's a little bit of American materialistic Christmas in our celebration, it is chiefly a religious holy day. A religious holy day like Resurrection Sunday or Easter Sunday. I mean, that's another topic too, which we'll talk about. But if your kids think that Easter is all about an Easter bunny, you are failing them miserably. They need to understand that there are two major religious holidays. And of course, holiday comes from holy day. And one of them is the celebration of the birth of Jesus, when God the Son took on flesh and became incarnated. So the first reason why I don't think Santa should be celebrated is because children already have a very difficult time distinguishing those things, and we need to help them profoundly distinguish. Secondly, because you're absolutely lying to your children. And the lie is an innocent lie, but the lie matters. And this might not happen to your children, but that lie oftentimes, I mean, studies, I've read about this, I've met people who this has happened to them. Studies demonstrate that many children, when they find out Santa's not real, it has a profound effect on them with God as well. The Santa figure is omnipresent. Santa knows all things. He knows what you did all year long. He has little emissaries. Now this elf on the shelf who watches every single thing, and the gargantuan marketing power behind the elf on the shelf. They think that you're rewarded or you are punished by what you do to how good you are. Santa appears only on special occasions, if you even get to see him. And when you find out the whole thing's a sham, and you apply some of the exact same aspects of Santa's character and his personality and his attributes to God, it is not, this might sound crazy to you, but it's not crazy. It is not uncommon for people to say, well, why believe in God? I thought the same things about, and it's different. It's different with God. Well, many kids, many teenagers have asked the question, why? And many atheists today say the exact same thing. They'll say, when I was a child, I believed in Santa as well, but then I grew up. And so they associate belief in Santa with a belief in God. And that is absolutely pernicious. It is dangerous. It's not a good idea. And not to mention, you're just lying to your children. My father-in-law used to tell his kids, he used to over there run over there, if they were not eating their food right or talking back or whatever, he'd go over there and grab the phone like he's going to call Santa just to manipulate them to eat their food or whatever. That's horrible. I mean, they're just, and I've told them that. I said, I can't believe that. And they do it. I asked my wife, what did you? She goes, well, we'd eat. We were convinced he was going to call Santa. Thought, my goodness. Anyway, well, what am I proposing? Number one, Christian parents should stop lying to their kids. Stop propagating secular mythology in a purely religious celebration. And that's the same, of course, like I said, with the Easter Bunny. That's the same thing. So I don't think you should lie to your kids at all, ever. Two, when Santa Claus comes up, and it will in our society, you merely explain that Santa and all the mythology surrounding him is, in fact, or real or true, but the character of Santa Claus is based on a real Christian bishop who lived in the 4th century. That's what I've told my children when they were real little. There are great books that explain all this with cool pictures. For example, there's a book called The Legend of St. Nicholas. Another book is called St. Nicholas, The Real Story of Christmas Legend. And there are other ones. You don't have to cease to all talk of St. Nicholas. You just have to speak of the historical character and how good he was to people, etc., and so forth. Then after you speak of him, remind your children again of why we celebrate Christmas. That is, don't just keep talking about St. Nicholas. Number 3, Christian parents should say over and over and over and over again exactly why we celebrate Christmas. Explain the biblical narrative of how God made the whole world and people, and how people kept breaking his rules so much that he was very sad and upset. So God decided to come to earth and to tell us exactly what he wanted us to know and how to live, died for us, rose from the grave, and lives inside of believers to continue the work Jesus did. So you're always repeating that narrative to them to the season. Number 4, before one single present is open, read, at minimum, Matthew 1, 18-2, 11. And Luke 2, 1-21. That's Matthew 1 and Luke 2. Those are the only 2 places in the Gospels that speak about the birth of Jesus, though there are other references to him coming in, like in Galatians and so forth. But those are the 2 narratives everyone knows, Matthew 1 and Luke 2. Read it before any presents are open, and don't rush through it. Read it slowly. Ask your children questions about the text. You are in control of their discipleship. No one else will be with them on Christmas morning or before or after it to explain it like a parent can. Let them see, no matter how impatient they are, that they do not do certain things in life before remembering what God has done for us. So before anything's open, I've done this my entire life with my children. And guess what? It works. Well, David, they'll be upset. Let them be upset. Who's the boss? Who's the parent in this situation? And the more and more upset, the more you've got work to do. I'm serious. If they cause a huge commotion, it demonstrates your children's hearts. And you've got a lot of work to do as a parent to get as much as you can, that entitlement out of them. By the way, there's a book called On Entitlement by John Townsend. It just came out. On Entitlement. Look it up on Amazon by John Townsend. It'll help you a lot. Number 5, when you watch Christmas movies, every time the movie character says, of course, the true meaning of Christmas is, pause the movie or the show and say, no, that's not right. What is the true reason we celebrate Christmas, kids? We did this all of my children's lives. Because every single movie and show, the true meaning of Christmas, I've realized it's about giving. It's about friendship. It's about family. It's about the spirit of giving, the spirit of love, the spirit of hope. You need to always negate that message. If you don't, your children will assume it's right. Now, David, that's a big deal. You're making it sound, it is a big deal. It is a big deal. We as parents are in charge of discipleship, not your stinking children's minister at church, not your youth minister, not your pastor. We are in charge of that. And if we don't have the message right in our own mind as adults, how in the world will our children understand what to believe? So you need to stop the movie and negate the message. No, that's not what Christmas is about. Christmas is a religious holiday, and we celebrate it to celebrate the birth of Jesus. Now, right now, some of you are really upset. I sent this blog out one time, and one mom was so upset she cried almost uncontrollably for weeks because she just thought she was a horrible mom. And I don't think you're a horrible mom, but here I'm going to respond to some common objections. David, that mythology is so fun and innocent. My response, it is fun. I concur. So is playing with Transformers. Yet my son knows full and well that Transformers are not based on fact. Also, being fun is never more important than telling the truth. Let us not evade what we're doing when we propagate the Santa mythology of him and all his reindeer. We're lying to our kids. And to make it worse, we allow something else to substitute or take prominence over a Christian holy day. Imagine how you would feel if I started an entirely fictional mythology involving decorations, songs, books, and movies that took place on your birthday every single year. Your birth would take a far distant place among all the, quote, innocent fun taking place because the fiction. People all around you ask every single year on your birthday, what's the true meaning of this day? It's about being with family. It's about enjoying the weather one day a year. It's about, that would be pathetic and infuriating. You would say, no, This is my birthday. It's not about the spirit of junk. It's my birthday. Christians are aware that we are not merely circumventing the celebration of a human birth, but the birth of the God-man Jesus. Well, David, there'll be that kid everybody hates. Well, would everyone hate your child if they didn't believe Transformers were real? Of course not. Besides, believe me, you can instruct your children it's not their job to go around and tell everyone Santa's not real. I used to tell my son this all the time. You're not the anti-Santa police. If someone asks your child, then your child should tell the truth. But they're not anti-Santa missionaries. Both of my children did not believe in Santa. My daughter did for a little bit, really, really little, only because she heard it everybody everywhere else. But as soon as we told them the reality, the world was not blown, and we instructed them. They did just fine. They didn't go around telling everybody that Santa's not real. They would talk about when they came home, and we would always talk about the religious aspects. So let's take Christmas back in our homes. Let's be Christian parents who take discipleship seriously. Let's stop allowing every other faith to be the paragons of religious instruction. You don't find this happening in other religions. Let our children be raised in homes that certainly celebrate giving gifts and putting up decorations and singing, as long as they're done without secular mythology attached to everything. Why do those things? Because we're celebrating Jesus' birth. Now look around your house or your apartment. If a stranger walked in, would they see anything or hear anything that told them you were a Christian this season? Or any time for that matter. Or would your season look, sound, and be performed just like any non-Christian? That's the question to ask this season. Happy Advent. Merry Christmas. Let's celebrate the birth of Jesus together. See you next time. Thank you so much for listening to A Glimpse of the Kingdom. If you want to listen to more, go to my website, davidpendergrass.com, and look at one of the tabs that says podcast. If you click that, it'll take you straight to my podcast on iTunes, or you can search for it on iTunes if you want to, A Glimpse of the Kingdom. But also on my website, you'll see another way to get, if you're an Android listener on your phone or you just don't use Mac computers. Again, davidpendergrass.com, and click podcast. It'll take you exactly where you need to go, and you can subscribe from there and get this as often as you like, and also see my blogs and so forth. If you want to get me to come to your organization or church, otherwise to do some consulting, you need to go to davidpendergrassconsulting.com. davidpendergrassconsulting.com. You'll see the information there. If you want to reach out to me on Twitter, you can find me at Dr. D. Pendergrass, at Dr. D. Pendergrass.